Pottinger, let me start with you. Did China try to manipulate public opinion in the United States and around the world during the early days of the COVID pandemic?
Senator Rubio, certainly we saw all sorts of activity by Beijing, overt propaganda, as well as what I would call more shadowy schemes to influence and amplify messages that in many cases are disguised to appear as though they are organic discourse between private citizens, but are really very carefully and well-resourced campaigns, orchestrated by Chinese propaganda officials. Now, you're referencing the time early in the COVID epidemic. Some of the ones I can just think of off the top of my head were efforts to create doubt about the origins of this pandemic. In fact, to claim that that the pandemic originated from the U.S. military. We saw efforts to undermine, as I mentioned earlier, the credibility of our vaccines. Certainly quite a lot of propaganda, both overt and covert, designed to create distrust and a lack of faith in democracy as a whole, and to amp up and elevate the idea of Leninist totalitarianism as a somehow superior model, in spite of what the record has been over the decades that the Chinese Communist Party has been in power. I'm thinking of the tens of millions of deaths of its own citizens from mismanagement from their government. So the short answer is yes, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Puglisi, the National Counterintelligence and Security Center warned, I think in February, that China's collecting the medical data, the DNA, and the genomic data of Americans. Why do they want the DNA and genomic information of Americans?
So China has amassed the largest genomic holdings of anywhere in the world. One of the most important questions in the next generation of both medicine and also biological research is the genotype to phenotype. So understanding what genes do. And so access to that kind of data, both their own and from other places in the world, gives them an advantage in figuring out some of those problems. And we know from their central government policies and programs, they have emphasized the importance of next generation medicine, and that is a huge focus for them.
Meaning the designing of precision medicine that allows curing specific conditions in people with specific genetic makeups.
Yes.
Mr. Evanina, how, in your opinion, how confident is China in their ability to get American banks, American investment firms, and American big business, how confident are they in their ability to get these to act as their lobbyists here in Washington?
Senator Rubio, there's no lack of confidence. I don't believe the Communist Party of China has any reticence to believe they can't acquire whatever they want to acquire. And you see currently now with the new movement of the Communist Party of China investing into pension funds, both at the state and local level, as well as into our thrift savings plan federally. They do it in a sublime manner, sometimes shrouded in U.S. business investment and shrouded with third-party fund companies to be able to get and garner their corner their market, so to speak, in our investment fund. So they have no lack of confidence in acquiring anything they need in our financial services sector.
No, and that's for sure. But I think the question was, how confident are they in their ability to get an American company, for example, or a finance sector or what have you, to use the lure of access to the Chinese marketplace to get them to come back to Washington and lobby policymakers here against or for decisions that China favors. In essence, they deputize them to come back and say, don't do this or don't do that. Their ability to turn these American entities into lobbyists for their preferred policy outcome in our policies.
Again, there's no lack of confidence, and we've seen that occur in other parts of Chinese lobbying here in D.C., hiring former members of Congress, former members of the administration, former members of large banks to be able to come back and lobby and explain China's methodology and their narrative as to why their funding is more important than any funding here. And I will reiterate, Senator Warner's point that some of my activities subsequent to retirement, the private equity and venture capital folks are saying they're getting 30% ROI from investments in China.
Yeah, and so just real quick tied to that, are they forward thinking enough to look at a state legislator, a mayor, a commissioner at the local level and say that person may one day be a member of Congress? Let's start working them now, get close to them, and have them adopt our favored narrative of China so that in the future, when they wind up in that position, they'll be more favorable to our views.
Absolutely, and it's a common practice.
I would point out that I want to note that Senator Cornyn and Senator Feinstein did some very good work that all of us on the committee supported on trying to strengthen some of those restrictions on that foreign investment with the CFIUS Act. Senator White.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank to all our panelists.